Your final lecture for EO6 is going to be on Protista and fungi. At the top of the page, you see it says Protista, and then it says domain and kingdom. The domain for Protista is Eukarya. The kingdom is Protista. And then the definition of a protist is a eukaryotic organism, which we know because of the domain, that cannot be classified as fungi, plants, or animals. And what we're going to see is that Protista are kind of this catch-all kingdom where organisms who don't fit in one of the other three get lumped into this category. There is some changes that might happen over the course of your lifetime when it comes to this kingdom, but as of right now, Protista is the kingdom, the official kingdom that we will go by. Because protists are organisms that don't fit in the other three kingdoms, what we find is there are a lot of organisms that are like the other kingdoms but don't quite fit. So we have animal-like protozoans, or animal-like protists. These are often referred to as protozoans, and they are animal-like because they're going to ingest other organisms. So just like an animal, they have to consume other organisms. They are heterotrophic in order to get their energy. These are things like flagellates, ciliates, and sporozoans. There are plant-like protists, and just like plants, they will obtain their energy through photosynthesis. They are autotrophic. These are things like seaweed, kelp, algae, euglenoids, and dinoflagellates. And then the last one, these are fungus-like, and you'll learn here in just a bit that fungus will obtain their energy by absorbing nutrients from their environment. And so things like slime molds are protists that are fungus-like because they also absorb their nutrients from their environment. There are a few characteristics about Protista that you need to know, starting with the fact that they are eukaryotic. They have a nucleus in their cells. Because the group of Protista is so diverse, they can be unicellular or multicellular. Since we have some that are animal-like, some that are plant-like, some that are fungus-like, we're going to see that there are some that are unicellular while others are multicellular. We're going to see that some are autotrophic while others are heterotrophic. So they can be both of those things. And then they do move using cilia, flagella, and pseudopods. So they have different methods of movement that they can utilize. As I said earlier, and you should fill this in that top table where it says energy consumption, animal-like protists are going to ingest other organisms. They are heterotrophic. Plant-like protists have to obtain their energy through photosynthesis, that they're going to perform photosynthesis, and they're autotrophic. Fungus-like protists are going to absorb nutrients from their environment, and they are going to reproduce by releasing spores, just like fungus. Protists can cause a number of diseases, including giardia, malaria, dysentery, sleeping sickness, and toxoplasmosis. Giardia and dysentery occur when you drink contaminated water that contains these protists. Malaria and sleeping sickness are transmitted through another vector, meaning some other organism carries it. So mosquitoes carry malaria, the tsetse fly carries sleeping sickness, and then toxoplasmosis is going to be found in contaminated soil and can happen when you eat undercooked meat. Within the environment, like I was saying earlier, protists are very beneficial. The photosynthetic ones are going to produce oxygen just like plants do, and they're going to take in carbon dioxide. They are a huge oxygen producer in our atmosphere. In fact, they're believed to be the first organisms to produce oxygen and put it into the atmosphere along with that cyanobacteria. They are big producers in the aquatic food chain. They're going to be consumed by many herbivores that are in the ocean. Along with that, though, they can produce deadly algal blooms, and that can be a big concern in different communities. And you may have noticed in the summer, you're prevented from going to a lake or something like that because of blue-green algae that's growing, and therefore that lake is closed. If you flip your paper over, you will be on the fungal side, and fungus belongs to the domain Eukarya, and it is in the kingdom fungi. These are important decomposers. They are going to be a food, and they also can be parasitic. If you look here, this is an ant that has been taken over by a parasitic fungus. This ant breathes in little spores that allow it to get into its respiratory system, and then it starts to reproduce, and it's absorbing nutrients from the ant to live and thrive. Eventually it kills that ant, and then once that ant has died, it will send up these stalks right here, which are going to allow it to release new spores. And so any ants that come by and check out, hey, what happened to this ant, they can in turn inhale that spore and then continue that process. Fungi, some characteristics of them are that they are going to have thread-like bodies, and they do have a cell wall that is made of chitin. The cell wall in fungus is made of the same substance that insects' exoskeleton is made of. We'll talk about that when we get to our animal unit. A very important characteristic about fungi is that it absorbs nutrients from their environment. So they are heterotrophic because they can't make their own food. They do absorb it from their environment. Another important characteristic about them is that they are made of these filaments, which is kind of like that thread-like body. And those filaments are what allows them to absorb their nutrients. And you can see that in the picture here, that down here, all those threads give them more surface area, and the more surface area, the more area that's exposed to absorb nutrients. There are two pretty common types of fungus, molds and yeasts. Molds are going to be fungus that is found in damp, dark, steam-filled areas, so they require moisture. They are almost all multicellular. They're typically going to be, when you see them, their appearance is fuzzy and colorful. You'll know they reproduce both sexually and asexually. So if it's mold, it can reproduce both ways, and they can really be problematic because they can cause allergic reactions. People have mold allergies. They can cause respiratory issues, especially black mold. So if you're living in an area, I had a friend that lived in his parents' basement when we were in high school, and he every so many weeks would get sick, and they never had it tested, but we kind of wondered if maybe there was some mold in the basement growing because of that dark, damp characteristic of basements, that he was constantly exposed to that and was having respiratory issues. The other type of fungus, and we talked about this with the brewer's gut, is yeast. These are going to be found in fruits and berries. They're in the stomachs of mammals. They're on our skin. They are typically unicellular, so they are often white and thready in appearance. And most of them are going to reproduce asexually through budding. So they're going to bud off of one another and go on to reproduce that way. They also can cause infections in individuals, especially in those with compromised immune systems. Females are largely at risk of yeast infections in their vaginal tract. But men can also get yeast infections. You can get them on any part of your skin. As we saw with the brewer's gut, he had a yeast infection within his gut because that's where the fungus was growing. So those are some of the types of fungus that we can look at. Then below that table is a review. You should write whether or not the organism is prokaryotic or eukaryotic, so what type of cell they have. You should identify typically how many cells that individual is made of. So are they multicellular, or are they unicellular, or are they both? How they obtain their nutrients. Do they typically get it through, are they autotrophic, are they heterotrophic, or are they both? And then I would like you to just give an example of the type of organism.